The VA.
Yeah.
Right. Always in the news. But honestly, how much do we really get about how it all works?
Yeah.
It's easy to have opinions, but today we're going deep on the actual facts.
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing it by digging into a chapter all about the VA.
Okay.
From this document, it's called Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise.
Okay, so right away, important to remember that colors things, right? Looking at this through a conservative lens is going to kind of frame how they see the VA's strengths and weaknesses.
Totally, yeah. It's like we've got a map of the territory, but knowing who drew it helps you understand what they chose to emphasize, what they maybe left out,
Sure.
So before we even get into their arguments, just remind folks listening, just how big are we talking? What all does the VA do?
Oh, huge. I mean, healthcare, obviously, everyone thinks of that first,
Right.
but also benefits, like all the disability payments, pensions, education assistance. They even handle memorial affairs. It's massive. Over 400,000 employees.
Whoa, seriously, that's what, bigger than some branches of the military?
Could be, yeah.
I can already see where this gets tricky. Taking care of individual veterans with their own needs,
Right.
but then also running this giant machine, that's got to be a tough balance.
Totally. And that's exactly what this source jumps into, how the VA's reputation has gone up and down, even over just the last few presidents.
Oh, interesting.
They start by saying, like, end of the Obama years, the VA was not looked on too fondly by veterans or a lot of their own employees.
Yeah, they actually used the phrase low esteem. What was going on back then?
Well, big one was 2014, that whole healthcare access crisis.
Right.
Remember all those stories, veterans waiting forever for appointments, even rumors of secret lists?
Yeah, it was a whole thing.
Shook people's trust, for sure.
Understandably. So then what? Things got better under.
Night and day, according to this source. By 2020, Trump administration, they're saying the VA was one of the most respected federal agencies. Quite a turnaround.
Okay, now that's a swing. What'd they credit it to? New leadership or?
Partly, yeah. They also point out the VA got huge funding increases, even compared to after other wars, like tripling their budget since Bush.
Wow, okay.
But their big argument is it was about making the VA more veteran-centric.
There's that word. Sounds good, but I bet everyone's got their own definition of what that means in practice.
You got it. And this source would argue the current administration, under Biden, they've strayed from that veteran-centric path, especially when you look at healthcare.
Which makes sense. That's got to be the bulk of what the VA does, budget-wise anyway, right?
For sure. And this is where this whole community care idea comes in.
I've heard that tossed around, but what's it actually mean in this context?
Basically, it's about veterans getting care outside the VA system, like going to private doctors, that kind of thing.
So if the VA is for veterans, shouldn't their own health care be so good you wouldn't need to go outside? See, this is getting at the heart of it already.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
If the VA is for veterans, shouldn't their own health care be so good you wouldn't need to go outside? That seems like a key part of the debate.
Exactly, and that's what this source would say, right? Like, by resisting that community care idea, the VA is kind of holding veterans back in a way.
How so?
Well, they'd point to things like how long it takes to get an appointment at the VA, all the bureaucracy.
Oh, yeah.
Their argument is that forces veterans to stay in a system that might not even be the best for them, even if there are better options out there.
So it's about choice then, giving veterans more control over their own health care decisions.
Right, exactly. And they bring up this law, the VA Mission Act. Might ring a bell. Passed back in 2018.
Vaguely, remind me.
So the whole point of it was to make it easier for veterans to use private health care.
Okay.
If the VA couldn't provide what they needed, like in a timely way, or if it was a specialty they didn't have in-house, that kind of thing.
Makes sense. So, law designed to give veterans more choices sounds good. What's the problem?
Well, this source would say the current VA, they're dragging their feet on actually making the Mission Act work the way it's supposed to.
Really? How so?
They're claiming there's all this resistance inside the VA to expanding this access to private care.
Huh. Why would that be? You'd think.
Their take is some people in the system, they see it as a threat, right? If more and more veterans go outside, what happens to the VA itself?
Ah, okay. So it's almost like ideological. Like, what's the role of the VA supposed to be?
Big time. This source, they definitely lean towards the VA should be more of a facilitator.
Okay.
Make sure veterans can get good care wherever that care comes from, not necessarily be the ones giving the care all the time.
Interesting. So less about being the whole system, more about making sure veterans can navigate the system, find what works for them.
Exactly. They even talk about wanting to rewrite parts of the Mission Act.
Oh, wow. Really? To do what?
to, in their view, strengthen veterans' rights when it comes to this outside care, more transparency on wait times, stuff like that, holding the VA accountable.
So there's this accountability thread running through it.
Yeah.
It's not just about choice. It's about making sure the VA is held to a certain standard,
Yeah.
regardless of where the care happens.
Exactly. And this goes beyond healthcare too, right? Like they make similar arguments about all the other stuff the VA handles,
Mm.
benefits, and man, the paperwork.
Right, because it's not just hospitals, right? It's disability claims, pensions, all of that.
Huge part of what they do. And they get real specific about disability, which makes sense. It's one of the biggest, most complex programs they run.
Yeah, and it feels like every few years, there's some new condition that gets recognized as service-connected, right?
Yeah.
Like Agent Orange back in the day, or now all the stuff about burn pits.
And that's actually something this source points to as a potential problem.
Really? How so? I mean, those expansions of what qualify, it's a good thing, right? Helping more vets.
They'd agree those things are well-intentioned. Like the Agent Orange Act, that was 91. And then more recently, that PATI Act in 2022. Their argument is these things, they put a huge financial strain on the VA. And if it keeps expanding,
It's not sustainable.
that's their worry, yeah. They even suggest the VA needs to rethink how they decide those disability ratings in the first place.
You mean like how much money each condition is worth, so to speak?
Exactly. That schedule they use, they think it might be too generous, basically. And they're worried about fraud, too.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough sell, I'd imagine.
Oh, for sure. Huge political hot potato. But their point is, if you're worried about the VA literally going broke,
Got to look at everything.
that's how they see it. But it's not just the money, right? They also get into how the whole system runs, the bureaucracy itself, the wait times.
Which, honestly, is that not the complaint about, like, every big government agency?
True, true. Not unique to the VA. But their argument is it's especially bad there. And they don't think just throwing money at it fixes it.
It's a culture thing.
That's what they say, like a resistance to change, not enough accountability, that kind of thing.
So how do you fix that? You're talking about a huge organization, tons of employees, long history. So how do you fix that? You're talking about a huge organization, tons of employees, long history.
Right. Well, this is where they get kind of radical with their solutions,
Okay.
honestly.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
They basically want to apply a whole lot of private sector like thinking to the VA.
Okay.
More privatization, bringing in companies to handle stuff, like maybe even those disability exams, speed up the process. Big on updating all their tech, too, which they say is way behind the times.
Probably true for a lot of government agencies, let's be real.
Oh, for sure. But they even suggest, like, get this, automating some of those disability exams.
Ooh, yeah, see, that's going to be controversial.
Yep.
Replacing a human with an algorithm, there's going to be pushback.
No doubt. But it fits their philosophy, which is if you want something done right, sometimes you got to look outside the government.
Yeah, government, stay in your lane,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Exactly. Their view is the VA, they should be the facilitator, right? Connect veterans to the best services, whoever's providing them.
So like what's that called when you have someone book your whole trip for you?
Travel agent.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah.
You're still the one going on the trip, but they handle all the details, find you the good stuff.
Perfect analogy. That's what they want the VA to be. Less about being the healthcare system, more about being the expert, guiding veterans to what they need.
Interesting. And this is where it gets, I don't know, a little spicy. They have this whole section, they call it the people problem.
Yeah. This is where you really see their conservative perspective coming through.
Lay it on me, people problem. Sounds ominous.
Well, they're basically saying the VA's whole culture, it's too focused on employees, not enough on the veterans themselves.
Interesting. Because I think, like happy employees, usually that means better service, right?
You'd think, right? But they'd argue the balance is off, that it's swung too far towards making employees' lives good, even at the expense of veterans getting what they need.
Okay, so what, like unions are too powerful, that kind of thing?
That's a big one, yeah. They're also not fans of all the telework stuff that happened, during the pandemic, like a lot of places did.
Oh, right.
They're very much everyone back in the office. That's how you get stuff done, how you make sure people are showing up.
Interesting. Which, I mean, that's a whole other debate, right? Work-life balance versus like the old school way of thinking about productivity.
For sure. And it gets even more specific, like hiring, they want the VA to specifically try to get people with private sector experience.
Oh, really? Like from the business world? Why?
They'd say because those folks, they've had to deal with the competition, efficiency, stuff the VA is bad at in their view, especially for things like the IT stuff or even just buying equipment and all that.
Huh. So almost like they want to make the VA less government-y, more like a business itself.
That's a great way to put it. Whether you agree with it or not, that's definitely the direction they're pushing.
So big picture, it sounds like this source, they see a VA that's gotten too big, too stuck in its ways, too focused on itself, and not enough on the veterans it's supposed to help.
Nailed it. And their solution is, like we've been saying, pretty drastic changes. Less direct service, more of this guiding hand, more private sector involved, big shakeup.
Really makes you think, like, what does it mean to serve veterans well? Is it about the government doing everything, or is it about giving veterans the power to choose what works best for them, even if it means going outside the system sometimes?
And that's the question we should all be asking, because no matter what your political leanings are, at the end of the day, it's about making sure those who served our country get the support they deserve.
Absolutely. And as always, we appreciate you diving into these complex issues with us. It's about understanding the different perspectives out there so we can all be more informed citizens and advocate for what we believe in. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions.